On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Greg Hahn. Greg is a data strategy leader with a deep background in governance. We're going to be talking about data strategy with him. We're going to try to understand where is a company along that maturity curve, along that data strategy maturity curve, and where do they fit in AI, Gen AI, privacy laws? I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to AI that people might not be considering. I think Greg's a perfect guest to kind of highlight some of those and walk us through that conversation. Greg, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Amir.
Awesome, man. So you have a deep background in this data governance, data strategy, privacy. Obviously, people will link to your profile and kind of get that full view of your background. To kick off this podcast, I thought it'd be great to maybe start up front. Everyone always talks about data strategy, and obviously that's a very different thing for different companies. And there are different companies along that maturity curve. And they have not necessarily all gone linearly, right? And I think that's a good place to start, is to talk about maturity and data strategy and maybe how those go hand in hand with each other.
Yeah, and when you really break it down, a data strategy is just a roadmap that outlines how your organization will handle and leverage its data over the next, I say, year, right? And ideally not 3 to 5 years, because we frankly had no clue 5 years ago that COVID was going to hit, and we really can't anticipate who's going to be on a team in the next year. So really, kind of that next year. But what companies, miss is aligning that strategy with their broader business goals and really ensuring foundational capabilities like data quality, governance, primary data management, that they really are prioritized. And in my experience, data offices often operate in silos, taking orders from individual business units or corporate functions rather than supporting the entire organization. And this approach, unfortunately, limits the impact data can have. To get real strategic value from data, chief data officers really need to, stop being order takers and lead with that enterprise wide strategy mindset that breaks down silos and drives decision making across the business. I've been sharing this philosophy, slow down to speed up. I talk to a lot of companies about this, and especially when it comes to data governance. If companies establish governance and data quality standards now, they can move faster and more effectively later. But without, again, these foundational data elements, organizations often, work harder just to answer basic questions, and they lose a ton of valuable time. So a mature data strategy can really help here. It guides companies on where to invest and really prepares them for all the increasing regulatory demands. I know not every industry has that, but I believe it's coming, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's really no need to reinvent the wheel. There are multiple proven frameworks out there that align to the DMBoK, or the data management body of knowledge, which is like the holy grail of data. And these frameworks can really quickly baseline a company's data capabilities, and understanding those capability levels is crucial, in my opinion, to pinpoint how to strategically grow. And as Gen AI and advanced analytics become more essential, solid data foundations are really critical to ensure that, initiatives deliver accurate insights and long-term value. So I tend to ask companies this question a lot. Are you, building a data strategy with the whole organization in mind? And a mature enterprise-wide data strategy isn't just about managing data. It's really about settling, the entire enterprise up for success in a data-driven future.
I think something you mentioned that I want to maybe dive back into, and obviously we can link to the DMBoK so people can go ahead and take a look at that as well. You said there are frameworks out there that you can go pick up and help you quickly. Use the word quickly. So I just want to come back to that term, because I want to make sure when we talk about quickly, we can maybe provide some guidance in terms of what that time frame is. Because I've spoken to data governance, professionals and leaders, and they mention it gets really complicated, complex. It can grind down to very snail's pace to getting things done. I kind of want to look at it from the standpoint of, okay, there are frameworks, and if we actually want to move quickly, because there are opportunities for our data, how does that fit into with each other?
So what I would say is, and when I say quickly, right, there are different types of frameworks that have hundreds of questions. There are frameworks that have a couple questions. But what I can tell you is, I worked at a large bank, a huge US bank. And when we initially did our first baseline assessment, we did a streamlined version of a DMBoK or DMA.org, aligned assessment that was simplified. And what we did was, most of the scales for all of these assessments are on a 1 to 5 basis. 1 being you're doing it at a project level, 2 you're doing it at a domain level or a corporate function level like finance, HR, marketing. 3 being you're doing it at the enterprise level. 4 AI is incorporated or advanced analytics, you have it working really well. And 5, you're the best. And no one really wants to strive to be the best. It's very expensive. It's not realistic. And there's only 1, right, of those. And so what we did was we started saying, hey, are we doing these things at a project, domain, enterprise level, really focusing on 1 to 3? Because the reality was we were barely at 1 to 2. And moving the needle from 1 to 2 to 3 is not only time consuming and expensive, but it requires a lot of effort, especially in a large organization. And you can work with your own company, you can work with consulting firms, you can work with lots of different organizations that actually have these frameworks already built out to simplify that initial assessment. I have done examples where we take 10 questions with a large group of people within a data office and assess and baseline their abilities across some major data capabilities. And it's very, very transparent to the organization. For example, do they have primary data management or master data management at the organization? And if 9 out of 10 people say it doesn't exist, you're barely at a 1. If 1 person says, yeah, we're doing it at a project level, we're starting to build out these things at our organization, we know the answer to that. But you can do baselines very simply up front, and then you can get much more detailed if you need to get that, for a regulatory reason, or you just want to know where you sit across the entire landscape.
You gave us a scale 1 through 5. You said 5 is obviously difficult and expensive. You mentioned doing the internal assessment when you were working for a bank. You guys were barely a 1. Where did most companies sit within that range? What should a company be happy with, or is it really predicated on maybe some other factors that you could dive into?
Well, I'll tell you right now, there are multiple, again, consulting firms out there that have shared this information, and it's public data. So you can find this if you do some searches on the internet, or if you purchase one of these, you can start seeing some of that data. Many organizations now, large organizations, are falling in that 2 to 3 range. And you'd be surprised at how many large companies are almost at the enterprise level. And why that's, to me, surprising is because of how many companies I talk to that have never done one of these things and are in that 1 to 2 range. And when they start seeing that data within like the banking industry or the healthcare industry, and then they start showing the technology industry, which is a little behind because, again, they don't have as many regulations in place. But then you start seeing the whole picture where every company is embedded in there, and you're starting to see that 2 to 3 range. You start saying, I am only doing things at a project or domain level, and some of my competitors are already ahead of that. So how am I going to actually, and I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, how am I going to leverage AI or Gen AI, if I can't even do basic governance or even measure my data quality at this point? And so I think there's going to be a huge shift in large organizations that have maybe been around for a long time that are going to need to move the needle pretty quickly once some changes happen in the regulatory space.
I mean, I guess transitioning to AI, something that I guess a lot of people in the data world understand. Data quality is an issue, right? That's the number 1, top 3, top 5 on somebody's list consistently. When we think about AI and we're thinking about how the quality of data is going to impact our ability to take advantage of a technology like a Gen AI, advanced technology, whatever we want to input there. Talk to us a little bit about those gaps. And, when we're talking about not only those gaps, we're also talking about control of that data, obviously, in reference to AI, maybe some of the issues that a company could face if they haven't done the legwork in it.
Yeah. And so I would say in terms of, gaps in AI readiness across organizations today, when I talk to companies about AI, I often hear this eagerness to jumping in and starting to reap the rewards of AI and generative AI. But, based on all my discussions with those large companies in the past few months, I mean, I've talked to probably more than 50. I'd say that most are not ready, right? There are tools there and the technology is advancing fast, but there's, I would say, critical foundational gap in almost every organization, minus the ones that are trending on the positive. Coming back to that overall organizational data landscape, and so how they manage and leverage data, and the landscape, that we're working with is broad, encompassing, major pillars that organizations should ideally strengthen before they can effectively harness AI. And so the first is that data-driven, business objectives, really aligning AI with clear business strategies. And surprisingly, many organizations struggle to answer basic questions like, what business value does this AI bring, and how will it drive our goals? Most don't have metrics or solid value drivers in place, which means there's no clear story around how AI will actually fit into the bigger business picture. And without this direction, they really risk implementing technology that doesn't drive meaningful impact. It's really expensive, and this is something that we've been focusing on, with organizations as we build out their data strategies up front. The next one is that empowered workforce and culture. And so data literacy is a massive gap. And while this seems like a very minor aspect of a data org, and I know it's deprioritized in many cases, data literacy is incredibly important to not just teach like the data org or the IT org how to handle data, but to ensure that all of your corporate functions are aligned as well. So, your marketing, sales, finance, HR, and, product teams as an example. And many employees, even those in a tech forward role, aren't comfortable working with data or understanding the implications of the AI that's being brought in as a use case, or just leveraging the data at the organization. And I actually wrote an article recently where I kind of shared a similar experience. I asked my colleagues to just check their privacy settings as an example, and they were shocked to find how many applications they have had microphones enabled. And so, like, if you've tried this on your iPhone or any other device, just go into your settings and your privacy and security and check out that microphone and look at how many apps are listening to you. And it's pretty alarming. And it's the same with AI. If people don't understand the data flowing in, right, or how to manage their own, data footprint, it's going to be really difficult to build trust in AI initiatives. The next pillar that I really talk to organizations about are those advanced data solutions, and really this is that technical backbone of AI readiness, the data science, the data marketplace, the self-service analytics, and so on. And the problem is many organizations either lack the necessary data science skills, or they haven't built out that marketplace, right, to allow teams to easily access and experiment with data. And really, AI demands a really strong data infrastructure. And a lot of companies aren't simply, there yet. I did a poll recently, just to kind of find out how many organizations are really ready to scale AI. And I found that, just from the responses I received, just about 15% of organizations feel that they're ready to scale AI across the enterprise. And honestly, I think it's much lower, because if I would have got maybe a larger pool size, I would see that. But that really does speak volumes about what's going on right now in this environment. And then the next pillar that's extremely foundational for organizations is that data integrity and security. And this is where that governance and quality and primary data management and security falls, right? And frankly, I think this is the area where you have the most glaring gaps in organizations. Poor data quality is a huge issue. Without strong data governance, companies are risking, feeding low quality data into their AI models, and it results in costly mistakes, and even PR disasters. McDonald's just had an issue with this recently with their drive-through chatbots. They were serving 260 chicken McNuggets for someone who ordered a 6-piece, 9 iced teas instead of 1, and asking, if they wanted bacon with their ice cream. And while that might be popular, right? It might be a popular trend. I don't think McDonald's is purposely asking customers if they want bacon. And so, there's no shortcut here. Orgs really need to really focus on that governance, security, and ethics framework in place to ensure that AI doesn't create issues, right? It hopefully solves them, right? And the final pillar that I talk with organizations about quite a bit is that infrastructure and architecture. And that's where the technology and, the data platforms and real-time data, services sit. And these are really the enablers, right? That make data accessible and scalable. Many companies are still working on legacy systems that will not support the agility that AI needs. And so, that foundation isn't supporting the vision that you hear from different leaders within organizations. And so as AI continues to grow, I think these gaps are only going to get wider if organizations don't address them. And so the future is really, pushing us towards AI driven decisions. You probably heard digital twins and even concepts like global identity, which are already underway, within our environment. And, with that comes, I think, a huge responsibility around data ethics and privacy. And so, because if we don't get the right governance and culture in place, we risk creating a digital twin of ourselves that really doesn't reflect who we are, but rather a version that companies think we are. And that's, a huge problem. So I have this buddy, and I want to share this example here. I have this buddy who's a lifelong Los Angeles Dodgers fan. And he and I have been talking, about how our conversations are leading social media algorithms to show us content that we both do not want to see. I'm in the Bay Area. I'm a huge Giants fan. And so seeing anything in Dodger blue is nauseating. But to him, orange and black is equally challenging. So now, how have we combated this? I mean, we're trying to get this away from us. So we both flag our opposing team content in social media as inflammatory. Now, if multiple people do this, would the data be inflammatory? Right? I'm not sure yet, to be quite honest. But what I can tell you is we're both seeing less of each other's opposing team info now. Although with the Dodgers winning the World Series, I can't seem to block everything. So that's been challenging. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, do we want AI to really shape who we are, or should we be in control of how AI uses our data? And as individuals and organizations, we really need to build out a data culture. I think that supports informed, responsible decisions, and it starts with those kind of foundational elements.
Absolutely. I love walking through those main pillars because I think that gives everyone a baseline and understanding of the conversation. By the way, that's kind of funny. I think I've seen that. Obviously, microphones listening to us, and my wife actually, not jokingly, will start talking to my phone when she wants something, so it keeps popping up on an ad, and it's a good hint apparently. So
yeah. It's creepy because, it doesn't even have to be your phone, right?
It doesn't.
Your voice has now been...
Voice, yeah. I mean,
it's there. So someone else's phone might hear me say baseball cards, and I might see baseball cards.
Absolutely. I guess when you're thinking about that privacy aspect within data, you can relate it to AI. It's still pretty new, right? We have a few laws in place. There's GDPR. California has one. We're starting to see some states look at it, but obviously it's still early days of trying to enforce data privacy laws. What is the impact to AI? I guess just with the current environment, there's some challenges as is. What are those challenges when it comes to data privacy laws and AI?
Yeah, and honestly, I know that privacy laws are going to start impacting businesses, and frankly, I think it's in a good way. And so I know that no one wants to slow down. No one wants innovation to slow down. I know in the tech industry in particular, which I've worked in the last 7 years, no one wants governance and no one wants to slow things down. Again, that phrase, slow down to speed up. But let's be realistic. Trust is never been more important for companies than it is today. Look what's going on in politics, right? Globally with deep fakes and even just accurate polling. We're in a world where everyone from customers to businesses to individuals are questioning how their data is being used. And I think you and I have talked about this, but I'm not sure how familiar people are with the Twitter whistleblower hearing at the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee that took place at the end of 2022. But without going into too much detail, that lead security chief, came on and testified about how much sensitive information was easily accessible to employees and at so many levels of the organization and really many other aspects about putting data security at risk. And you heard multiple senators united on both sides, didn't matter who it was, in finding a solution for the United States when it comes to data protection. And fast forward to today, and there's a proposed American Privacy Rights Act. And it's finally been submitted to really help build a foundation of trust. And I think it's saying to companies, you know what, we need to be transparent about the data that we're collecting and kind of give us back control over the information. And so when businesses, have to follow through, it's going to boost their credibility and relationship, I think, with customers. Another big piece here is, right, that data quality. When companies are required to manage data responsibly and with precision, it's going to actually improve their overall data strategies. So it's not about just like being compliant. I know people want to check that box, but I think it's going to actually set up better data that can lead to stronger insights and really help business perform better in the long run. And I get it, right? Businesses are going to be worried about the costs of compliance, right? There's going to be huge probably, but there are, there are going to be upfront investments like setting up data governance framework. I mean, if you haven't done it already, it's going to happen. You're going to have to hire a privacy and security officer, which I know are in place in many organizations, but in a lot of places, it's being manually handled. But that will help improve the data handling process. But the alternative of not doing this is going to be, I believe, significantly more costly. So if a company waits until a data breach, for example, to happen or gets hit with a regulatory consent order, which I have been part of in an organization, those costs skyrocket. Like they're 10x with what you're spending on something today. So actually being proactive can actually save companies a lot of money in the long run. Because if any regulatory body is forcing you to do work in a shortened time period, I mean, it's just, again, exponential cost increase. And so one really interesting part, again, I don't know how many people have actually read into this American Privacy Rights Act, but it's that focus on large data holders. Companies that handle a high volume of data or sensitive data, they're going to need to report on things like how they're processing data requests and probably start doing their own privacy assessments on their algorithms, and which sounds intense, but I think it's actually going to be, again, an advantage. It's encouraging companies to innovate responsibly. It'll let them keep their, operations and customer trust intact. And, from a larger picture view, I really think these laws, they're going to level the playing field. Instead of every state having, different rules, like again, California, the CCPA, or just GDPR in Europe, having a federal standard is going to give businesses, a consistent framework to follow. And it's going to be a big deal for companies that operate across, the entire country and globally, right? I think it's going to simplify compliance and really free them up to focus on their customers and less on the legal, maze that's probably already in place right now. Because again, standard policies and global consistency is going to make it so our data can actually be used better. And so again, privacy laws, they're going to impact businesses. It's imminent. People in the past were saying, it's going to take some time. Now it's been submitted. It's getting, it's going to get finalized soon. But I think, again, I look at it as it's going to help create an environment where trust, data quality, compliance really come together, which will lead to, frankly, just better business practices and better AI, which is, I think, what we all want, but we know it's going to take a little while to get to.
It's interesting as you're talking through these various points, and you initially said sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. I think you've alluded to several different scenarios where if you're not addressing them now, they're just going to be a looming problem down the road. I guess just based on that. So you've mentioned obviously their governance frameworks. Yeah, obviously there's a chance that we might have an American Privacy Rights Act that companies have to adjust to. If you're right now, a chief data officer, analytics officer, and you're looking at the future, where do you start tackling the privacy? Just because you don't potentially know what it will be in the final bill, do you start adopting the GDPR? Do you start looking at California? Where is it that you could start doing some work just to prepare if you haven't really needed to thus far?
Yeah, and I think, again, when it comes to privacy, which is just one aspect of control, I think you just need to build out, right, data governance in your organization, which, again, has been something that's been in the back burner for many organizations. Really, that it's a structure that helps keep data safe, accessible, and frankly, valuable. I know the value of data is a big topic. I've been hearing it talked about for 15 years, and 15 years ago was important. It's been important from everyone says their data is gold, right? Or oil, or whatever you want to call it, whatever buzz saying you want to call it. But it's extremely valuable. And so it really starts with defining out a framework of who owns the data, who can access it, who's accountable for it. And so, when we started building out the data office at that large bank, we started assigning roles like data stewards and appointing, if you haven't appointed a chief data officer, doing so to oversee that governance strategy, making sure everyone understands their responsibilities. And once that's in place, then you can align governance with the business goals. And so, an example, right? If your goal is to better understand your customer, you need policies that ensure customer data is secure and accurate and really available for analytics. And so governance can really support those business needs and not hinder them. And the privacy and security piece, they're core to governance. Besides protecting the data, right? Governance has got to comply with the privacy laws. And again, you guys can all look this up, but there's these frameworks out there now that are that have cloud data governance capabilities that you can get certified for, so that, for example, if you have automated data governance in place, again, this would be for a very mature organization, but if you had it and laws change, they just get imported into a system, an organization system that handles your data catalog and your business glossary and all that, and those other ways of understanding your data, and they will automatically update in real time. So if you have automated data governance, you would be way ahead of the curve. And there's companies out there, one in particular, who just got their certification, Microsoft. If you look up this Microsoft's cloud data certification, it's pretty impressive that a company that size is able to do that. But again, data quality, another focus. Data has to be accurate and clean to be useful. Establishing standards for data entry, running regular quality checks, and creating processes to handle outdated or duplicate data. That high quality data is crucial for everything, for decision making to AI models. And again, your governance, it really does need to be adaptable, especially if you're building it out now. It's just better to build up front that way. So as the organization grows, so will the data needs. And so I recommend, regularly reviewing that framework that you have put in place and adjust the policies as needed. I know many organizations I've worked with are doing that, that have already started building that out. And so in the end, I'd say governance is really about creating that system that keeps data both secure and functional. Done right, it's not such a painful hurdle. I'd say it's probably a better way to ensure that data supports the business and really helps allow for more growth.
Awesome, man. I think we haven't even scratched the surface. So I recognize that in a topic such as this. If somebody wants to reach out to you to follow up on something you mentioned, ask you a question that we might not have covered, what is a good way of touching base with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. I love talking to individuals about all their data challenges and frankly their use cases, and understanding how they're trying to solve them, or if they've actually solved them. I'm in a lot of different data forums where I'm constantly chatting and learning different ways to solve problems, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help organizations build their data strategies and let them grow over time.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll make sure we post your LinkedIn in the show notes so somebody can find you. Greg, thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely, Amir. Happy to chat. And if you guys want to learn more, I'm happy to talk again.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, I'd like to ask you for two things. One, I think this episode, my takeaway as I'm listening to Greg talk is you have to sometimes really slow down, do the work to actually be able to take advantage of some of the benefits of having proper data strategy, governance, privacy intact, so that you can actually leverage these AI and Gen AI solutions that your company is going to find opportunities. And you really do have to do the work. And Greg went through a lot of different aspects. And please share this with somebody else that is within the data space going through this. I think there's a lot of great content there. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.